Hello.
Hello. Hi. Again, we greet you from within the shadow of the everlasting hills. May peace be with you this day and always. Sorry for the late start. We're waiting for a few extra stragglers. Fortunately, you guys care about America. You're here on time. You're ready to go. When the stragglers come in and sit down next to you, you might want to say, excuse me, why don't you care about America? Why do you hate America? Why?
Yeah, you'll notice at the bottom here, this front section, or the back section there in the first few seats, we marked that off for the communists.
Look at that.
And we got no one.
2 sections. All commies.
By the way, I'm Stu. This is Pat Gray.
Hi.
Thank you all so much for coming out. It's going to be a great day. And there's quite a bit to cover, as you will find out during the day, including we have not only you guys here watching, but also we should say hello to the Insider Extreme members who are at home right now.
Hi.
Please give them a warm welcome. They love you here. They love you.
People are actually viewing this on the World Wide Web, which, of course, was invented by Al Gore.
He tried to come, but I guess there was a problem with his convoy. Do you have any information on that?
His SUVs got stuck in traffic. But yes, I did invent the internet about the same time Love Story was written about Tipper and me. But we also have some very special dignitaries here among us, and we would like to welcome Senator Orrin Hatch today. Also, Congressman Jason Chaffetz is here. And
I think everyone thinks they know where he's sitting, but no one actually does.
A little iffy on Congressman Chaffetz, are we? Still trying to make up our minds. It's only been a year and a half. We'll see how he does. I don't know. I'm not sure. We also want to welcome First Lady Annette Herbert to the arena today. Thanks for coming.
So you don't come to a Glenn Beck program show without homework. It's not like you just sit here and enjoy yourself. There's work for you to do. And you'll notice, a lot of people actually like that. It's surprising. One of the things we'll be doing throughout the day is having your questions answered by the speakers. And there's an easy way to do that. While you're right at your seats, just email it to revival@glennbeck.com. Any question you want, send it to revival@glennbeck.com throughout the day. We have, some questions kind of filtered in throughout, and then there'll be a longer Q&A section later in the day where we get to a lot of stuff. So anything you can think of as you're going through the day, please send it there to revival@glennbeck.com.
We're going to have a whole section, in fact, where Stu and I will ask your questions of all the speakers here today, which include, of course, but are not limited to, David Buckner is here, David Barton, Judge Andrew Napolitano, and, of course, Glenn Beck.
They seem pretty split on Glenn, too. Kind of 50-50 on him.
Yeah, a little iffy.
Also, a couple of other interesting things going on today. LDStravel.com is giving away to you guys here today a trip to Israel for 8 days. Yeah, very cool. So you got to be 21 years or older to enter. But just write this down or keep it in your memory banks. I see you filming me. I see you. Don't try to hide your camera. Any unauthorized reproduction or retransmission of this broadcast is just ask the NBA. They'll let you know. So here's the number to text. It is 801-411. You're going to text the name Beck BECK, to 801-411. You could do it throughout the day. We'll remind you incessantly about it so you know what it is in case you don't have it now. It's text the word BECK to 801-411 to win a trip to Israel. Very cool package.
The other thing is that our friends from the National Center for Constitutional Studies are here. And yes, they deserve it.
Woo! Constitution! Woo!
These guys have been fighting for a really long time to keep the Constitution alive, and they do a great job of it. And they're selling some books in their booth, and I believe that's on, last I heard, it was at Concourse X. And all proceeds from the sales of that booth today, from all of their books, will go to the Special Operations Warriors Fund. So,
and the 828 event, so it's going to be great.
Yeah, and 828.
And they, you probably know a lot of their books, such as the 5,000-Year Leap. Anyone heard of that?
The real George Washington, the real Thomas Jefferson, the real Ben Franklin, the real McCoy, the real thing. I think they have a book on Coke. The
Other White Meat, I believe, is one of their books.
Yes. Are we done yet?
I know, this is endless, isn't it? 828, by the way, you guys know about that. Anyone going to 828 in Washington? Wow. That is very impressive. As you know, you can go to glennbeck.com/828 and find out all the details about it, as well as they're doing great auction items and donations. Certainly would appreciate anything you can do for that. And that is, as well, benefits the Special Ops Warriors Foundation, which is a fantastic cause. So thank you guys so much for coming out. The American Revival begins in just moments.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Faith is different than hope. It's a knowing, a believing in something when circumstances around you would indicate otherwise. There is no country on earth more familiar with the concept of faith than America. Faith is the very cornerstone of the foundation on which our country was built. You might even say it's in our DNA. Every chapter of our great history begins with a spectacular act of faith. Let me take you back to September 1620, the beginning. 102 passengers crammed aboard the Mayflower. It was a creaky old vessel, certainly not a passenger ship by any stretch of the imagination. It had been a wine hauler. Pilgrims, young, old, filled every nook and cranny. Friends, family on shore begged them to reconsider. They warned of the perils that awaited them if they were lucky enough to survive the trip across the unknown sea. The Pilgrims stood firm on their faith that no matter what the challenges might be that lay ahead, freedom was waiting on the other shore. On to 1775, and what had to be the greatest mismatch since David picked up his slingshot and squared off against Goliath. What in the world would possibly motivate an upstart group of British colonies without a real army to seek their freedom by declaring war on the greatest military power in the world? Where there seemingly was no hope, there was faith. Faith that the cause of America was righteous. The same feeling of knowing that inspired young David. Just about a century later, American families were packing up everything they owned and headed out to a new frontier, the Wild West, in pursuit of happiness. They didn't know what they were going to find when they got there or what they would encounter along the way. They weren't even 100% sure that they would make it there alive, but they knew they had to try. They had the pioneering spirit, which is just another way of saying that they had faith in their own ability to create a better life. In 1879, after hundreds and hundreds of failures, the faith and perseverance of one Thomas Edison gave us the electric light bulb. But he never stopped believing in the idea or his ability to get it right. Same force at play late 1903 in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, where a young man, ignoring warnings of dire consequence, strapped himself on board a contraption that would become the world's first powered airplane. When no one else believed, Orville and Wilbur Wright knew man could fly. A few years later, faith in American innovation led builders to reach towards the heavens with Manhattan's Chrysler Building and Empire State Building, with every steel girder and concrete block of the iconic skyscrapers defying the legion of doubters who said it just couldn't be done. In the 1960s, a young minister had the faith to dream of a better day, of freedom, equality, a realization that all men are created equal. Martin Luther King's giant-like faith gave him assurance that all the pain and his ultimate sacrifice would lead to an outcome men before him could only dream about. 2 decades later, Americans once again exercised faith and put that faith in the most unlikely of politicians, an actor who made up for a lack of experience with a passion for America and a faith that she could return to her previous greatness. And in 2001, our faith greatly challenged, our security shattered, a country united in the faith that we would overcome, that God was still watching over, that no country, no terrorist would ever destroy our American way of life. Faith. From the very beginning of this great country, faith. Faith in God. Faith in an ideal. Faith in our own abilities. It has driven us to become the greatest people the world has ever known. But we are, right now, as a country, facing one of the greatest challenges in our existence. We face an uncertain future. New, imposing enemies, new frontiers that need to be won and conquered, a need for innovation to save our economy. We face a battle for the Republic, a battle for America's survival. Does the faith that burned in the hearts of our forefathers and mothers exist in us today? Do we still have what it takes to meet our challenges head on, knowing that our cause is righteous and just? Can we still reach for answers not readily apparent, solutions not yet revealed? Do we, you and me, still have faith?
Hello, Utah! Hello. Sit. We have a long day. Thank you so much for coming. God bless you. God bless you. God bless you. God bless you. I tell you, when we first started this, it was about, 6 months ago. And I had been holding on by a thread because we have gigantic problems that we have not seen before as a collective. We've faced each of these battles one by one, but as a collective, never anything like this. And I have to tell you, the more research I do, the more I learn about the people that we have currently serving, supposedly in the name of our republic and our Constitution, the more frightened I become, the more I look at it and say, my gosh, the armada that they have amassed and put up against the American people is staggering. 6 months ago, I was holding on by a thread, but let me tell you, as I was standing backstage and I was watching that video on Faith, let me tell you something right now. Prepare to witness miracles in your lifetime. God is not having us hang by a thread. He has put a rope down for us to hang on to. I promise you, in the next 6 months, you will see things, good and bad, that you did not see coming. I promise you that the Lord is going to reveal himself, and America is going to begin to come together again. United we stand, divided we fall. One thing I need you to get out of this today is we can disagree. That doesn't mean that we have to be disagreeable. We don't hate anyone. I don't mean to lecture you because I'm tired of people lecturing us on how much we hate. We don't. We just love America. We come together and we unite on big principles. That doesn't mean that we don't state our position clearly and we don't stand fast. You do not compromise on principles. That is the thing that they don't seem to understand. But if we stand fast, if we hold on to the only thing, truly, the only rock that we can, God, if we hold on, if we build everything on that rock, we will not only survive, we will thrive, and America will lead the way out of darkness yet again. So, we have an amazing day. There are things that are going to happen today that haven't happened before on this event. I'm sorry, but I can't see you with my glasses, and then I really can't see you with the glare off my glasses. We have amazing people, including, I'm going to introduce you here in a second, to the guy I think is the most important man in America, quite honestly. You want to talk about a guy who has stood, not knowing exactly what it was going to mean, not knowing exactly what it was for, but stood his ground for a long time and preserved the history of America. David Barton is here. We have a guy today, David Buckner, who is he is from Columbia University, NYU. He is a business consultant. He's the guy who first came to me and he said, "Tell me your formal education." That was the first time that I met him. "Tell me your formal education." And I said, "I have none." He said, I'm with Columbia and NYU. I'm a professor there. And I speak on economics. I give lectures there. And he said, "You have none?" And I said, "No, sir, I'm a self-educated man." And he said, "I knew it." And I'm thinking, "Oh, really?" I said, "Why is that, sir?" And he said, "Because you think out of the box." He said, "I can't get students to think out of the box. Today, you're going to think out of the box." And then after him, Judge Napolitano is here. And then if you haven't passed out yet from exhaustion, I'm going to tie it all together. And I promise you this, by the end of the day, you will not be hanging by a thread. You will be hanging onto a rope, and you will know that America will weather this storm and any storm. But first things first, one thing that we don't do anymore that we need to. We did it when I was a kid, and for some reason or another, it's been brushed off as unimportant, and it is not. We don't start anything anymore, and if you run any organization, you demand it. We shouldn't start anything anymore without the Pledge of Allegiance and a prayer. So if I love every time we go to some city, they say, can we get some Boy Scouts to bring out the flag? And I said, we're going to Utah. Are you kidding me? The entire state is Boy Scout. They have the Boy Scouts.
Color guard, attention! Will the audience please stand? Color guard, forward march. Halt. Present the colors of the United States of America.
To lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, Senator Orrin Hatch.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
To lead us in prayer, Congressman Jason Chaffetz.
Please bow your heads. Heavenly Father, we're so grateful for this country. We're so grateful to be able to gather together. We're so grateful for this wonderful country, the land. Grateful for the founders of this country, for our Constitution. Thankful for George Washington and those that blazed the ways and the trails, for the millions of Americans who have made this country the strength of freedom and liberty. Please bless those men and women who are serving our country now and willing to step forward in harm's way. Please bless those families who have lost a loved one, that they know how much we care and love them. Please bless the speakers and the presenters today, and especially Glenn Beck for the great strength that he has to share. We're thankful for this wonderful land, for our liberties, that we may continue to have peace and harmony, but that we have strength, and that we're willing to stand up for what's right. We say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Boy Scouts, thank you.
About face. Color guard dismissed.
Thank you. I was talking to the Boy Scouts backstage, and if we have time today, I'll explain to you the Badge of Merit. This is the original Badge of Merit. This is what 828 is really all going to be all about. The original Badge of Merit given by George Washington. All the Boy Scouts sat in the back as I told them the story, and none of them had ever heard of it. Most Americans have never heard of it. It is a crucial and important story that we all understand. It goes back to God, and here's where we're going to begin. Faith. There is a perversion of faith that is going on in our country right now. A wicked, wicked perversion. And it is all about social justice. It's all about collective salvation. It's actually all about Marxism. Marxism. Let's go over how America really has always worked. And it really goes back to the merit badge of George Washington. George Washington knew if we were going to be a country that survived, we had to be a country of merit. We had to be a country of individual merit, a country of honor, and a country of God. That's the only reason we could beat England. So, Americans have always put God first. And from God, we got our morals. How do we behave? How do we treat each other? Where does charity come from? We get those ideas, and we always have, from God. So when we were faced with a problem like global warming, we would solve it. Well, where does social justice fit in? And how does socialism work? And now we're working on the redistribution of wealth. Listen to the gentleman who has just been appointed as our Medicare and Medicaid director. When I first started this program, they were still saying that I was bearing false witness, at saying that health care was all about redistribution of wealth. Well, look who the president has just appointed. A man who says health care must, quote, must be about redistribution of wealth. That's Marxism. In the early 1900s, when progressivism first began, the evil Woodrow Wilson. Who's with me on that? You wouldn't believe how many crazy professors are out there going, I hate that he hates Woodrow Wilson. And that's what helps me sleep at night. They tried to do this before. The turn of the century with Woodrow Wilson, he hated the Constitution. He hated the Founding Fathers. They couldn't get things done because we understood God first and we got our morals from God. So God was in charge. Our churches, our faith led the way. And our Constitution, we knew it. And our Founding Fathers, we loved. They had to dismantle them because you couldn't get God to do global warming and socialism and redistribution of wealth and Marxism. It wouldn't work. But if you read this up, it works. If you look and you start with Marxism, you'll never sell Americans redistribution of wealth. But if you start here with Marxism, Marxist, sure, they want redistribution of wealth, but Americans won't do it, so you got to change the name. You change it to socialism. You soften it. The Fabian Society did this in England in the early turn of the century. Socialism. But that didn't work for Americans either. We don't want to be socialist. We're connected up here. So we changed it to social justice. Social justice. Global warming. Now you got the problem. Well, we can solve it with social justice. God is telling you now, listen to your heart. Ecological justice, eco-justice for global warming. Do you see how we've been played? The same thing here, healthcare. It's social justice. Education, the border, it's social justice. Look, we don't hate anybody. I don't want anybody to not have healthcare. I don't want any good family coming here and living in the shadows. Immigration is crucial to this country. We had Ellis Island for a reason. We lost our way, and immigrants came here and made us better every single time. But we ask, no, we don't ask, we demand that you come through the front door. God develops his rules. The entire universe, nature's God is a God of rules, is a God of structure. He builds a house that is a house of order, period. You don't take things out of order. You come through in order with all things. Now, you can't get to Marxism this way, but you can this way. You can destroy America this way. We were built on God as our foundation. God was our foundation. And through God and our churches, we learn charity. And we took care of things. And the smallest point on the pyramid was government for those things that we just couldn't do ourselves. They flipped it. God is now the smallest. In every way, they are excusing God and pushing God out while using God. They've replaced him with social justice. And government is the biggest. This is a perversion. This is the cancer. Collective salvation. This is important. This is critical for people to understand. Christians, I don't care what your faith is, Christians believe Jesus Christ died on the cross for me. He died for you, and you, and you, and you. He died for all of us, but not collectively. We must accept that as individuals. I can't save you. You must save you through his atoning power. That's it. You must accept it individually as a guy who did it. I know. The president has given speech after speech after speech on collective salvation. He has said it in front of universities. We have played the tapes. Collective salvation, it is a perversion. It is liberation theology. Jeremiah Wright teaches it. It's actually from a guy named Cone. You must understand this. Collective salvation. Jesus was a victim. Jesus was a victim. The tomb is irrelevant. Him rising is irrelevant. We must save everyone, or we're not saved. That's the idea. That's wrong. And it puts someone in power. When they're in power, if they believe in collective salvation, it puts them into the position of the Messiah. It puts them in the position of, I must do these things. I must force these people to do this. And what is the road to salvation? The road to salvation, you're either an oppressor or you're the oppressed. You're a victim or you're the people victimizing. So the victims must take the power and the wealth from these people. That's what it is. And if these people, they can voluntarily give up their stuff and their position and their power, and if they won't do it, then these people must do it to save them. Let that sink in, because that's what we're dealing with. We must restore faith. And the best guy to do that, the best guy to be able to, we don't have to argue back and forth about religion. We don't have to argue with facts that nobody has. The facts are all there. They've just been erased by the progressives. So let's find the facts. Let's restore faith. Let's restore the faith of the founders. I'd like to introduce you to a guy who has been collecting the actual documents. I love hearing people argue against him. Is that they never said that, and he'll reach into his briefcase. Well, here's a letter signed by him. George. Here's Thomas Jefferson saying that, and it's his original handwriting here. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome David Barton.
Hey, bro. Thanks, guys. Good to be with you. Thank y'all. Let me start out by just pointing out really some of the blessings we do enjoy. 2 weeks ago, we had our national birthday. When we celebrated the 4th of July 2 weeks ago, we set another world's record. Nobody's been as long under the same piece of paper as we've been under that piece of paper. Now, there's 192 nations at the UN this year. That number goes up and down every year. Do you guys realize we are the only one out of the 192 nations that does not average a revolution every 30 to 40 years? I think it's pretty cool that we don't have a revolution every generation. Now, You look anywhere else in the world, it's going on. You look at France, they've had 15 governments while we've had just one. If you jump over to Poland there in the center, Poland's had 7 governments since 1921. If you jump over to the far edge there on the right, Russia's had 4 governments since 1917. You jump further off the map, you go to Afghanistan, they had 5 governments in the 20th century, 5 constitutions in the 20th century. They've already had another one this century. I mean, we're the most stable nation in the history of the world by a long shot. Nobody else even comes close. We're also the most prosperous nation in the world. You see, we have only 4% of the world's population, but we have 25% of the world's wealth. Did you know that according to figures from the U.S. Census Bureau, if you live below poverty, and we don't want anybody living below poverty in America, but if you live below the poverty level in America, you are more likely to own a telephone, a television, you're more likely to have an air conditioner, you're more likely to have an automobile, you're more likely to eat more red meat and have more square footage of living space than the average middle class in Europe. Did you get that? If you live below the poverty level in America, you're higher than the middle class in Europe. Do you realize how blessed we have been in this country? I mean, it's unbelievable the blessings we enjoy. And this is called American exceptionalism. That was a term given us back in 1831 by Alexis de Tocqueville, French historian, who came here and saw this, said, this is exceptional. I don't think any other nation will ever do what the Americans do. Now, what philosophy produced American exceptionalism? Well, to know that philosophy, we go back to the guys who gave us that philosophy, the Founding Fathers. They tell us what that philosophy is in 45 simple words at the beginning of the Declaration of Independence. 45 simple words. They say, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They're endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Now, that's the core of American exceptionalism, and out of that, there are 3 very simple principles that come out. We, from a government standpoint, not individuals, yeah, individuals too, but the government says, hey, we in the government believe that there's a creator. Number 1, that's what our document says. We acknowledge there's a creator. Number 2, we believe that that creator gives certain guaranteed rights to man. And number 3, we believe government exists to secure the rights that God gives to every individual. Not collective, as Glenn said. It's not collective, it's individual stuff. Now, if you don't get that philosophy down, you will never have limited government. You can't have limited government without, and that's what these guys understood. Limited government comes from that, because if our rights don't come from God, they must come from man. They must come from government. And if government gives you something, government has a right to take away from you or to regulate or to abolish whatever it gives. Therefore, if rights come from man, if they come from government, government's allowed to get into every single stinking thing out there. Only if you recognize that there's a God, He gives rights, and we exist to protect what He's given. Therefore, we can't touch those rights. That's the only way you ever have limited government. Limited government's not the size of government. It's the intrusion and the scope of government. It's what it gets into. And see, that's what the Founding Fathers understood. Now, when you see that document, you see the philosophy that we call American exceptionalism, you know, it sounds to me like the founders were talking pretty strong about faith in God. And, of course, today we're told, oh, no, secular nation, godless constitution, Founding Fathers, atheists, agnostics, deists. You know, it is an interesting thing about these guys. Fortunately for us, everything is recorded. They did on paper what we do with cameras and tapes and VCRs. They wrote it all down. George Washington has 100 volumes of published writings. John Adams has 33. You have Ben Franklin with 40. You have Madison with 60. You have Hamilton with 60. I mean, these guys wrote everything down. And it's interesting that they even wanted to make sure that we had access to it. So in Article 1, Section 5, Paragraph 3 of the U.S. Constitution, they required that everything that happens on the floor of the House and Senate be recorded in public records so that we can see it. Which means, for that reason, you can go this day to the records of Congress. You can go back to the very first day Congress ever met, or you can even look in a library and see that. If you go back to day 1 of the records of Congress, what you will find is the first time that our Founding Fathers, first time these guys got together, they opened with prayer, September the 6th, 1774. And as you read there in the records of Congress, you'll say, well, that's not a dinky little prayer, is it? No, it wasn't. According to historical records, the opening prayer session in Congress ran for right at 2 hours. Now, that is an interesting way for the founding. You know, we can't get this happening in religious bodies, but we get our Founding Fathers in Congress, and they didn't just pray that morning. John Adams wrote a lengthy letter describing what had happened to Abigail. John said that that morning in Congress, not only did they pray, but they studied 4 chapters of the Bible in Congress. And he said during the Bible study, Psalm 35 so jumped off the page at them. God made that so alive to them, changed their whole attitude on the American Revolution. So what did he do? Well, in describing this to Abigail, here's what he told her. He said, Abigail, he said, I must beg you to read that psalm. Read the 35th Psalm to your friends. Read it to your fathers. He wanted everybody to know, us included, what God had shown them that morning in a Bible study in Congress. He wanted all of us to read Psalm 35, and he said, read it to your friends, read to your father, and her father was the pastor of their church, the Reverend William Smith. I mean, he wants everybody knowing what happened in Bible study that morning in Congress. But it didn't just stop there. Back in that very first Congress, as John told Abigail, he said, Abigail, he said, we've appointed a continental fast. He said, millions will be up on their knees at once before their great Creator, imploring His forgiveness and blessings, as smiles on American council and arms. He said, can you imagine the impact of having 3 million Americans pray and fast for what's happening? Now, remarkable stuff. That was the first of 15 times that Congress called the nation to prayer. That was a day of prayer and fasting. Congress also had days of prayer and thanksgiving. Usually after you had a day of prayer and fasting, 4, 5, 6 months later in the records of Congress, you'll say, the congressman will say, you remember when we prayed and fasted? Man, look at all the answers to prayer we've had. Let's have a day of thanksgiving. And so 15 times in the Revolution, it goes back and forth between a time of prayer and fasting, a time of prayer and thanksgiving. These guys were so into prayer that when you look at all the prayer proclamations issued by founding fathers, by 1815, we have 1,400 official prayer proclamations calling Americans to prayer. Doesn't sound like a bunch of secular guys. Sounded like faith was pretty important to them. Sounded like they wanted us to get a hold of God, make sure God. These are government calls to prayer. 1,400 by 1815? Absolutely. See, faith was important to these guys. Now, 2 years later, when these same guys got together and they did our Declaration of Independence, these 56 signers that we have, you know, that document is so remarkable. It has ideas never contained in any other previous written document. And you go, where'd they get their ideas? Well, again, because they are writers, they tell us where they got their ideas. I mean, if you go and look at the writings, for example, of Ben Franklin or Thomas Jefferson, if you look at John Adams there, that's James Wilson. If you look at this man over here, Benjamin Rush, they all tell us that they copied the Declaration out of this work, the Two Treatises of Government by John Locke. Now, it used to be that if you went to school in America in government class, we always studied the Two Treatises of Government, because all these guys said the Declaration. Matter of fact, this guy on the left, Richard Henry Lee, and he's the guy that made the motion in Congress on June the 5th that we separate from Great Britain. As a result of that motion, they said, well, let's get a document together. So they appointed the 5 guys at the table to write the Declaration. Richard Henry Lee's the guy who got this whole thing started. Richard Henry Lee said that they, quote, copied the Declaration from those Two Treatises of Government by John Locke. Now, that's why we used to study it in school, because if you're going to study government, you need to know where it came from. If you're going to know where it came from, you got to study John Locke. But we don't study that today. We haven't studied that probably in a good 40 or 50 years. I wonder why. Because the document, the book, now that book's small. It's less than 400 pages thick, less than 400 pages long, but it's less than an inch thick. If you look at that document, you will find that book cites the Bible over 1,500 times to show the proper operation of civil government. We say, whoa, I thought government was secular. Well, good thing for us, they didn't think so. They think God should be involved in everything. That little book, 1,500 Bible verses on how government should operate, and it was from there that they copied the Declaration. No wonder we've lasted longer than any other nation. We had a different foundation, different philosophy at the beginning. This is what caused American exceptionalism. You'll find that throughout the Revolution. Matter of fact, by the time you get to 1781, the Battle of Yorktown, the British lay down their arms. We now are officially out from under the laws of the kings. Now, the reason that becomes important is prior to that, we had laws. For example, one of the laws that had been put by the kings on America, even 150 years earlier, said, if you live in America, you cannot print any Bible in the English language in America. Great Britain had a national, worldwide denomination for them. Whatever the king was, if the king's Anglican, will be Anglican. If the king's Catholic, will be Catholic. Whatever Bible he uses, that's what we all use. That's what he tells us. Well, as a result of the American Revolution, we're no longer under that particular law. So within 1 month of the Battle of Yorktown, the plan is set forth to produce the first English language Bible in America. First time America's ever been able to print its own Bible. That Bible came off the presses in 1782. When it came off the presses 11 months later, it's called the Bible of the American Revolution, one of the rarest books in the world. As Glenn mentioned, we're very blessed. We own about 100,000 documents from before 1812. I own thousands of the handwritten documents of George Washington, Jefferson, etc. And this book, they printed 10,000 copies of it. There's only 28 left in the world today. I have one. Library of Congress has one. It's a very rare little document. This is the first Bible printed in English in America. Now, interesting thing about this particular Bible is, you know who printed this? The Congress of the United States printed it. Whoa, the Founding Fathers printed the first Bible in English? Founding Fathers did that? Yeah, why would they do that? They tell us. It's in the records of Congress. They said that this Bible is, quote, a neat addition to the Holy Scriptures for the use of our schools, end quote. Whoa, time out. I thought these guys didn't want religion in schools. Yeah, you know, the Supreme Court told us that on June the 25th of 1963 in two cases, Abbott and Shemp and Murray Curlett. And we think that the way it's been for the last 50 years since the court told us is the way history is. No, no, no. There's a reason that for 350 years before that, we always used the Bible in education. It was not a problem for anybody, but it has been because, see, we don't know our history. As a matter of fact, here's the actual handwritten document from Congress. It's a neat addition to the Holy Scriptures for the use of schools. That Bible even contains a congressional endorsement in front. It says, resolve, the United States and Congress assembled recommend this edition of the Bible to the inhabitants of the United States. I mean, this is Congress doing that. Well, it was the very next year that these guys, these three Americans, signed the peace treaty to secure what they had announced back in the Declaration. I mean, these three guys here, you got John Jay on the left, John Adams in the center, Ben Franklin on the right. The peace treaty you can see today, it's at the State Department, 6th floor, John Quincy Adams State Drawing Room, Washington, D.C. You can see the treaty. 10 articles in the treaty, and this is what secured our independence. You see the three signatures are at the bottom, John Adams and Ben Franklin and John Jay. It's interesting to see what our founding fathers put as the title on the document that secured our independence. 7 years ago, they did the Declaration. Now they secure it. Look at the title. In the name of the most holy and undivided Trinity. I could be wrong, but that sounds religious to me. Oh, no, the founding fathers wouldn't want under God in the pledge. Oh, they wouldn't want in God we trust, as we've just seen Federal Judge Barbara Crabb say, oh, no, founding fathers wouldn't want a national day of prayer. That's way too religious. Really? The document that secures our independence, that's the title on the document? You see, that's why John Adams, who was there from start to finish, John Adams signed the Declaration, he signed the peace treaty. John Adams said it unequivocally. He said the general principles on which the fathers achieved independence were the general principles of Christianity. Now, this is as clear as you can possibly say it, but today we are determined to prove exactly the opposite. I love collecting articles like this. This is an article from the LA Times. It's called America's Unchristian Beginnings. It said the founding fathers were deists who rejected the divinity of Jesus. Now, this talks about Christianity because most of the founding fathers were Christians, but their point is, oh, no, no, the founding fathers weren't religious. They were all secular. They were atheists, agnostics, and deists. That's why a whole chain of newspapers on the East Coast ran this one. The authors of the Declaration were enemies of Christ. They were anti-religious. And you get professors like Stephen Morris, who ran this National Wire Service. He said the founding fathers were not Christians. I don't care what John Adams said. He doesn't have a clue what he's talking. I just love the arrogance of these guys. I've got a PhD, so John doesn't know what he's talking about. He only lived through it. He was an eyewitness. He was there. I wasn't, but I'm telling you, you know, what arrogance that we now look back at history and determine that because that guy doesn't like what they said, that they didn't say it. Well, a lot of people buy into that. I was recently at Duke University Law School, and that's a very elite school, very sharp kids there. And I put this picture up in front of them. I said, who do you recognize up there? And all the students found for me Jefferson. They all found Franklin, and that is exactly where it stopped. I said, whoa, time out. There are 56 guys up there. You've given me 2? Give me some more. I don't know who they are. So I said, let me help you. Let me just take you across the front row. Let me give you some little cues here. This man is Richard Henry Lee. Right beside him is George Clinton. Still moving across the front row, Sam Adams. You go to Charles Carroll. The guy in the light brown jacket is Robert Morris. Right beside him is Benjamin Rush. The guy leaning on his elbow there is Elbridge Gerry. Right beside him is Robert Treatpain. And I can keep going through the other 54. And they said, who? Never heard of those guys before. Isn't it interesting that today we've all been trained to recognize the 2 least religious founding fathers? You see, we can find Jefferson and Franklin, and of course all the other founders were just like Jefferson and Franklin. Were they really? Do you know out of the 56 guys who signed the Declaration of Independence, 29 of those guys held seminary and Bible school degrees? It's not bad for a bunch of atheists to have Bible school degrees, and apparently that's what's going on back then. See, today what we do is we take the exception and teach it. We don't teach the rule. We'll teach the 2. We won't teach the 29. And that's just the way it is. But we used to never buy this in previous generations because we know our own history too well. There's a great textbook back from 1848 we used in public schools for generations called Lives of the Signers. We had 4, 5, 6 pages on every single signer of the Declaration. We knew their faith. We knew their character. We knew their family. Matter of fact, we knew what it cost them. 7 of these guys did not live to see what they wanted us to have. 3 were prisoners of war. 3 lost their wives. 4 lost their kids, 17 lost their estates. We knew all that. We don't know that anymore. But see, we used to. There's even a textbook that we had called Wives of the Signers. We saw what the price they paid. I mean, how many were prisoners of war and died as a result of standing? Now, we reprinted those books and they're out, but this is just old school books we used to have. See, the way we do things today, it's very opposite. We would never talk about people like John Witherspoon because signer of the Declaration, he's the Reverend Dr. John Witherspoon. Best known gospel minister in his generation, has more than a dozen volumes of published writings as a minister. He's also responsible for 2 American editions of the Bible, including this one right here. This is original from 1791. That is America's very first family Bible. This is done by a signer of the Declaration so that families can have Bible studies together. Now, we also have other signers of the Declaration. You see here Charles Thompson. Charles Thompson. Now, Charles Thompson's a noted theologian. As a matter of fact, Charles Thompson is responsible for this Bible right here. This is the original. It's called Thompson's Bible. You can still buy it today in any major bookstore. This is the first translation of the Greek Septuagint into English. It took Charles 25 years to make this translation from Greek into English, one of America's most scholarly translations of the Bible, and it came from a founding father. We just had no idea that Thompson's Bible was a founding father. We have the same thing with Benjamin Rush. Benjamin Rush is considered one of the 3 most notable founding fathers. Matter of fact, John Adams said, among all the founding fathers, you have George Washington, Ben Franklin, and Benjamin Rush, and we have never heard of the guy. He's a huge civil rights leader, started the first abolition society in America, started the first black denomination in America. He's called the father of public schools under the Constitution, started 5 universities, 3 of them still go today. He is the first professor of chemistry in the United States. He did the first faith-based prison reform movement. He started the first school for women. I mean, it's unbelievable what this guy did. With all the other stuff that he did, and he signed the Declaration, ratified the Constitution, served in 3 presidential administrations. We've never heard of him. He's director of the U.S. Mint. He is the man that started the Sunday school movement in America. So that religious organization that still exists today, started by a founding father. He also is the guy who produced this work right here. This is the first Bible ever mass-produced in America. It's called a stereotype Bible. He did this because he started the first Bible Society in America. This is the Constitution for the first Bible Society. So here's the signer of the Declaration, starts our first Bible Society, publishes our first mass-produced Bible, and we have him down as one of our anti-religious founding fathers, the guy atheist, agnostic, deist. Now, of course, you will recognize folks like John Adams. I mean, John Adams, everybody knows. HBO did the special on him. If you've never seen an actual John Adams letter, let me show you one. I brought original letter here. This is just an example. He has 33 volumes of these writings, signed on the back here, John Adams. You can see right there. What I want you to see is the bottom paragraph of this letter. I'm going to put it up on the screen for you. I want you to see in John Adams' own writing what he says here. You read the bottom. If you're close, you can see the line there with the arrow points. It says the Holy Ghost. Now, this is John Adams. This is his own writing. This is what John Adams says. He says, the Holy Ghost carries on the whole Christian system in the earth. Not a baptism, not a sacrament, not a marriage can be administered but by this Holy Ghost. He says, there is no authority, civil or religious. There can be no legitimate government what is administered by the Holy Ghost. There can be no salvation without it. All without is rebellion and perdition, or in more orthodox words, damnation. John Adams said that? Yeah, and isn't it amazing that HBO can put together a whole special that leaves completely the faith of John Adams out of it? You didn't see any faith of John Adams in that thing. How do you do that? There's 33 volumes of his writings. You cannot read his writings without seeing faith jump out, but we managed to do it today. We managed to say, oh no, he was not a religious founding father. He's one of our atheist, agnostic deists. Same thing with so many others. Let me show you one more example. Charles Carroll. Charles Carroll here lived to be 95 years old. That was a lot of years in those days. He outlived his kids. He outlived his grandkids. And late in life, he wrote this letter talking about his preparation for dying. And this letter right here from him, you can see the original here up on the screen. I'm going to read to you out of the middle part of this letter. Right here in the middle, I want you to see what it says. Here he is. He's 89 years old at the time he wrote this. He knew he would be dying soon. And so what's his outlook into eternity? What's his outlook into the future? This is what he says. He says, on the mercy of my Redeemer I rely for salvation, and on his merits, not on the works I've done in obedience to his precepts. He's very outspoken. He's the wealthiest man in America. He actually took his money and put the money into permanently endowing religious organizations that would preach Christianity. He lived in a rural part of Maryland where there weren't many people there, certainly not enough people to support a ministry there, so he put his money into doing that across the country. As a matter of fact, this guy, the 56 signers, is the final one to pass away. When Jefferson and when Thomas Jefferson, John Adams died on the 4th of July, 1826, he's the last remaining signer. At that point in time, New York City said to him, we have an original copy of the Declaration, which they sent to him. Now, the original Declaration, July the 4th, is signed only by 2 individuals, John Hancock, Charles Thompson. It's not signed by all the other founders until the 2nd of August. So they said, we've got an original copy of the Declaration. You're the final surviving man that signed it. We would like you to inscribe your final sentiments on here, and we're going to display this at City Hall in New York City. You signed this so many decades ago. Here you are, the last one left. We've got an original. Please write on there your final sentiments about America. This is what Charles Carroll wrote that was displayed in New York City for all the public to see at City Hall there. This is what he said. He says, I am grateful to Almighty God for the blessings which, through Jesus Christ our Lord, He's conferred on my beloved country. Now, that's fairly outspoken Christian, but what we're told, oh no, these guys are enemies of Christ. You know, how in the world does that happen? Well, it happens because today we are taught the exception, not the rule. This is part of what's called deconstructionism. They're determined to show us everything bad that they can find and let us see none of the good that's out there, and that changes our whole. That's why I feel like we got a need to go across the world and apologize for America, because we've been educated under deconstructionism, not actually what happened. Same thing happens when you go to the signers of the Constitution. 39 signers, 55 delegates there. We're told today that these guys are atheists and agnostics and deists, that they wrote a godless Constitution. Professors tell us that all the time, and people buy into that for the same reason. They don't really recognize who's up there. You would never recognize, for example, Abraham Baldwin, the youngest theologian in America. He's the founder of the University of Georgia, which he started as a school to train ministers for the gospel. You also have up there Rufus King. He's from New York. He's the founder of the American Bible Society. He also did the New York Common Book and Prayer Book Society. You also have Charles Cotchwood Pinckney. He's from South Carolina. He's the founder of the American Bible Society as well, the first national Bible society. You have William Samuel Johnson, a theologian from New York. He actually is the guy who started Columbia University and did it as a school to train young men for the gospel ministry. You have James McHenry, the Secretary of War under both George Washington and John Adams. He's the founder of the Maryland Bible Society. You have Roger Sherman, theologian from Connecticut, wrote the entire doctrinal creed for his denomination. Roger Sherman, noted theologian, wrote out all the doctrines for his denomination in Connecticut. We also have theologians like William Livingston, who became the governor of New Jersey. And by the way, when he was 14 years old, he was serving as a missionary among the Mohawk Indians, the most ferocious tribe of Indians in America. And at 14 years old, he's already in ministry. You have Gouverneur Morris. He is the man who physically wrote the Constitution. He's called the penman of the Constitution. He had to take all the ideas that they came up with on the convention, put it down there. And because he was and he spoke, by the way, he was the most active member of the convention, spoke on the floor of the convention 173 times. Well, when France saw how well we were doing over here, France said, we want to do what you guys have done. And so he wrote a 3-volume set to show France how to have a constitution that would work like ours. And right up top, he told the French, now, if it's going to work for you, here's how it works for us, and the only way it's going to work for you is if you make sure you have the religion, if you teach religion in schools. You cannot have secular education and expect to have a nation that survives. You've got to make sure that God's part of what. Now, this is a guy that we call the penman of the Constitution, and he's writing documents for other nations showing them that they got to keep faith as part of what they do. Alexander Hamilton, you recognize him. He was a general, the first Secretary of Treasury. He's the guy who started the Christian Constitutional Society to make sure that we elected to office people who supported Christianity and the Constitution. Those were his 2 objectives of that society. You have John Langdon. John Langdon, as governor of New Hampshire, he's one of the founders of the American Bible Society. You have Gunning Bedford, one of Washington's generals. Every time Gunning Bedford closed a speech, here's how he closed his public speech. I copied this line out of one of his speeches. This is what he did for all of them. He says, now to the triune God, the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, be ascribed all honor and dominion forevermore. Amen. But who's ever heard of Gunning Bedford, signer of the Constitution, one of our generals? You have James Wilson, signed the Declaration and the Constitution, started the first school of law in America. I have his original law books. He said, students, you cannot have a good civil law if it violates God's divine laws. Anything that violates God's laws is not a good civil. That's why we always posted the 10 Commandments not in churches. We posted the 10 Commandments in government buildings because we wanted to make sure we didn't violate divine law. And, I could take you through the others, but let me take you even to the least religious, Ben Franklin, because on Thursday, June the 28th, 1787, they were having trouble at the convention. They've gone 5 weeks. They were fighting. They were arguing. They were bickering. They couldn't get along. It was at that point that Franklin, 81 years old, the old man of this convention, he gave the longest speech at the convention. And it was a speech to try to call them together in unity, because everybody came with their own agenda. You had the New York plan, you had the New Jersey plan, you had the Connecticut plan, you had the Virginia plan. Everybody had a plan, but they weren't coming together. New York's already had it. The delegation's going home in disgust. They're tired of fighting. Virginia's had it. They're going home. So at that point, he arises and he gives this speech. He's talking to George Washington, the president of the convention. Under parliamentary procedure, you don't talk to the delegates, you talk to the leader of the convention. And this is what he said. He said, Mr. President, the small progress we have made after 4 or 5 weeks, close attendance and continual reasonings with each other, he says, our different sentiments on almost every question is, methinks, a melancholy proof of the imperfection of human understanding. We have just spent the last 5 weeks showing the limitations on human wisdom. He said, we've gone and we can't agree on anything. He says, we indeed seem to feel our own want of political wisdom since we've been running about in search of it. We've gone back to ancient history for models of government and examined those different forms of republics which now no longer exist. We looked at Greece and Sparta and Rome. Doesn't work for us. He says, we've viewed modern states all around Europe, but find none of their constitutions suitable to our circumstances. And we looked all across Europe, but that didn't work either. He says, in this situation of this assembly, groping as it were in the dark to find political truth, and scarce able to distinguish it when presented to us, how has it happened, sir, that we have not hitherto once thought of humbly applying to the Father of lights to illuminate our understanding? He said, in the beginning of the contest with Great Britain, when we were sensible of danger, we had daily prayer in this room for divine protection. This is where they signed the Declaration. That's where they had chaplains and prayer all throughout. He said, we had daily prayer in this room for divine protection. Our prayers, sir, were heard, and they were graciously answered. He said, all of us engaged in the struggle must have observed frequent instances of superintending providence in our favor. And have we now forgotten this powerful friend? Or do we imagine we no longer need his assistance? He said, I have lived, sir, a long time. And the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth, that God governs in the affairs of men. He says, if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it probable that an empire can rise without his aid? He said, we've been assured in the sacred writings that except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. He said, I firmly believe this, and I also believe that without his concurring aid, we shall succeed in this political building no better than the builders of Babel. He says, I therefore beg leave to move that henceforth prayers imploring the assistance of heaven and its blessings on our deliberation be held in this assembly every morning before we proceed to business. Now, may I point out, that's not bad for your least religious founding father. He has just gone through and He's chewed the other guys out for not praying, and he's quoted to them out of Genesis, out of Psalms 127. He quoted to them out of Matthew 6. He quoted out of James 1. Quoted all these scriptures to show them they're not praying enough. George Washington records in his diary that at that point in time, they took 3 days off, and they went to church during that time. Oops, guys, lost the slides. If we can get the slides back up. They went to church in that time period. And they specifically, according to George Washington, went to the church of the Reverend William Rogers. William Rogers had the convention, federal convention there in front of him, and he prays a special prayer. His prayer was actually a very long prayer. I have the original prayer. It was actually printed in the newspapers of that day on the front page so that everybody in the city would know the prayer that was just prayed over the Constitutional Convention. This is part of it. This is part of his prayer. It says, this is a period, O Lord, big with events, impenetrable by any human scrutiny. He said, we fervently recommend to thy fatherly notice that august body assembled in this city who compose our federal convention. Will it please thee, O thou eternal I am, to favor them from day to day with thy immediate presence? Enable them, he said, be thou their wisdom and their strength. Enable them to devise such measures as may prove happily instrumental for healing the divisions and promoting the good of the great whole. I mean, everybody knew they were fighting. Well, after this time of prayer, they came back, and the delegates said that the attitude was different. Jonathan Dayton said they started cooperating with each other and started thinking, that's not as dumb an idea as I thought it was. Only 10 weeks later, we get the document in which we now govern. 10 weeks is all it took them to create that incredible document. Now, having finished that, what did they think about what they had just seen? It was all together. It was all falling apart. They go to church for 3 days and pray. They come back. 10 weeks they do it. What did they think about the document? Well, Ben Franklin, who called for prayer, this is what he said at the end of the convention. He says, I beg I may not be understood to infer that our General Convention was divinely inspired when it formed the new Constitution. He said, this wasn't the same as the prophets writing the scriptures. He said, I'm not saying this is equal to the Bible. He said, but I must own that I have so much faith in the general government of the world by providence that I can hardly conceive a transaction of such momentous importance should be suffered to pass without being influenced, guided, and governed by that omnipotent, omnipresent, beneficent ruler in whom all inferior spirits live, move, and have their being. He said, I'm not telling you this is exactly equivalent to the Scriptures, but I'm telling you, this is as much a work of God as anything else that's ever been done in history. Nothing secular in his mind about what went on. Same thing with James Madison. James Madison in the Federalist Papers, this is what he told the nation. He says, the real wonders of the Constitutional Convention overcame so many difficulties. He said, and to overcome them with so much agreement was as unprecedented as it was unexpected. He said, it's impossible for the pious man not to recognize in it a finger of that almighty hand which was so frequently extended to us in the critical stages of the Revolution. Hey guys, God showed up again. He showed up in the Revolution. He showed up again in the writing of the Constitution. That's what James Madison tells the whole nation. And George Washington agreed. This is what the President of the Convention said. He said, as to my sentiments with respect to the new Constitution, it appears to me little short of a miracle. He says it demonstrates as visibly the finger of providence as any possible event in the course of human affairs can ever designate. If you've ever seen God show up, we just saw him show up at the Constitutional Convention. And Ben Rush, who I mentioned earlier, Benjamin Rush, this is what he said about it. He says, I do not believe the Constitution was the offspring of divine inspiration. Like Franklin, he's saying this is not the same as what was written by all the Scriptures. And he says, but I'm as perfectly satisfied that it's as much the work of a divine providence as any of the miracles recorded in the Old and New Testament. Now here he goes through saying, there is no miracle in these Scriptures bigger than what just happened in the Constitution. And somehow we're told today, oh no, this is a godless Constitution. Now, how can that possibly be? Well, if I take this book, this is the textbook that's used across the nation in our schools. It's written by 2 Cornell University professors. Here's their picture on the back. How do these 2 professors say that, oh, all the founding fathers were atheists and agnostics and deists and none of them believed in... I mean, I've shown you a bunch of documents here. I've called specific numbers, but we're teaching kids, no, it's all secular. On what basis do they say that? Let me show you the back of the book. You see up here on the screen, you see the slides here. You go to the back of the book to look at footnotes. Now, when you go to the back of this book and look at footnotes, there's a note on sources right there. You know what they say about the sources to prove the founding fathers were all atheist, agnostic, deists? They say, we've dispensed with the usual scholarly apparatus of footnotes. Really? Hey, we're PhDs. You can trust us. We know what we're talking about. Really? I mean, we get so many original. No, we're PhDs, and none of these guys believed in God. See, that is nothing but pure revisionism, and that's what we've had a steady dose of for the last several decades in our history. Now, American exceptionalism, this wasn't something that was just lightly understood. I mean, we understood that God was at the middle of American exceptionalism, and that's why when you look at just even the great... Just look at presidents saying it. I mean, it's one thing for professors or founding fathers. We understood this in every single generation. You take someone like President Andrew Jackson. He says, the Bible is the rock on which our republic rests. You can take a president like Zachary Taylor. Zachary Taylor says the Bible is indispensable to the safety and permanence of our institutions. Free government can't exist without it. That's what the founding fathers said. You also have Teddy Roosevelt, who said this. He says, the teachings of the Bible are so interwoven and entwined with our civic and social life, it'd be impossible for us to figure what life would be if these teachings were removed. The Bible has so shaped our culture. Now, we don't know that today because we're told, oh, it was all secular. And these. No, I could track you back through these cultural traits that we enjoy today and show you where it came from scripturally. Same thing with Harry Truman. Harry Truman says, the fundamental basis of our Bill of Rights comes from the teachings which we get from Exodus and St. Matthew, from Isaiah and St. Paul. He said, I don't think we emphasize that enough these days. He said that 50 years ago. I sure agree with him today. We don't emphasize that enough. But here's the president saying that. I mean, everybody knew this stuff. This was common knowledge. President Roosevelt said it this way, we cannot read the history of our rise and development as a nation without reckoning with the place which the Bible has occupied in shaping the advances of the Republic. You get President Ronald Reagan, who said it this way. President Reagan says that the many influences that have shaped the United States of America into a distinctive nation of people, none may be said to be more fundamental and enduring than the Bible. He says, if we ever forget that we're one nation under God, we'll be what nation gone under. And see, that was what we knew throughout history. That's what we always believed. Every one of those guys just said exactly what George Washington said in this work right here. This is from 1796. This is his farewell address. This is the final address he gave when he left off. He says, guys, here's what's brought us to this point. Here's what we're going to have to do to survive. And in going through the farewell address, here's the warning that he gave the nation. He says, now, if you want us to survive, all the stuff we've done, if you want our politics to continue to do as well as it's been, this is what he said. He says, of all the habits and dispositions which lead to political prosperity, if you want your politics to do well, of all the habits and dispositions that lead to political prosperity, he said religion and morality are indispensable supports. If you want government to work well, the two things you've got to have involved are religion and morality. That's not what we hear today. As a matter of fact, he went further. He gave us a litmus test. He said, in vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism who should labor to subvert these great pillars. Washington, who is the great patriot himself, who had all the patriots of Valley Forge, who gave that initial badge of merit, that merit badge, he says, hey, I won't let you call yourself a patriot if you try to separate religion and morality from public affairs. That's the test of patriot. Whoa, that's strong stuff from President Washington. But you see, that's because we understood that religion and morality were the indispensable supports. Now, let me close with a challenge to you. We got to relearn our history. We got to tell others about our history. We got to defend it's time to be a patriot again, to defend religion and morality in public sphere. I mean, we got to do that. Let me close with this word from President Reagan. He gave this back in September of 1985. So 25 years ago, it's as if he delivered it today. This is what he said. He says, perhaps the greatest triumph of modern conservatism has been to stop allowing the left to put the average American on the moral defensive. We've got to get re-educated on who we are as a people, not let these guys shove us into a corner and keep us quiet. No. I mean, they love to shout at folks like Glenn and say, oh, that's not really the way it happened. It is the way it happened. And who cares what the loudmouths say if the rest of us know what the truth is and keep pushing back with the truth? And that's what he said. He says, we can't be on the moral defensive. He says, by average American, I mean the good, decent, rambunctious, and creative people who raise the families, go to church, and help out with the local library. Common Americans. He says, we have great work ahead of us. He said, once I said this is a wonderful time to be alive, and I meant that. He said, I meant that we're lucky not to live in pale and timid times. Here we are. These are not pale and timid times. He says, we're lucky not to live in pale and timid times. He says, we've been blessed with the opportunity to stand for something. He says, we have good reason to be hopeful and optimistic. He says, we've made much progress already, so let us go forth with good cheer and stout hearts, happy warriors out to seize back a country and a world to freedom. That's it. We need to be happy warriors out to seize back a country and a world to freedom, and we can do it, guys. God bless you. Thanks for letting me share with you.
Come here.
David, it's funny. It's funny because David and I have only known each other for 8 months, something like that. I've seen pictures of his family. I know his wonderful wife, but we've never done anything what I would call fun together. Like, hey, let's go out and just do. But yet I feel like David is becoming one of my best friends. He is a truly, truly honorable man, and I am humbled by the service that you have performed for so many years. Thank you.
Thanks.
So if you hang for a sec.
Okay.
David is hammered all the time, and just takes it.
Not that he knows anything about that, being hammered all the time.
He's a great example, and I wanted to ask you a couple of things. First of all, I came to you 5 months ago or so, and I said, like I had this genius idea, David, we just have to get all the faith together. We have to get everybody together, and we need our
preachers and our pastors and our bishops to start talking about the fundamental principles of America. And he said, I want the Black Robe Regiment. I'm like, what? I didn't know about it until David talked about it. And honestly, I was backstage and I was with a bunch of people, so didn't hear. Did you talk about the Black Robe?
No, sir, did not.
Okay. Explain quickly what the Black Robe Regiment is.
Black Robe Regiment was the preachers. They were responsible for all those things you saw in the Declaration. Historians have documented that every single right set forth in the Declaration of Independence had been preached from the American pulpit prior to 1763, which means the Declaration of Independence was nothing more than listening to the sermons that Americans had been listening to for decades leading up to it, which is why John Adams, when he was asked who's responsible for independence, he started listing preachers like Samuel Cooper and Jonathan Mayhew and George Whitefield and Charles Chauncey. The British agreed. The British said if it hadn't been for those stinking preachers, America would still be a happy British colony. So the British
And hang on just a second. That remains true today if it's not for our preachers, if our people on the pulpit don't talk about politics, don't tell me who to vote for, don't tell me about the Republicans, don't tell me about the Democrats, tell me about the principles of America.
Right.
If God's people don't stand, we'll be a happy little colony again.
Yeah, exactly right. and so the British called them the Black Regiment, which is the robes they wore, the Black Robed Regiment. And when they sent the troops here, they targeted the preachers and tried to kill preachers all over America because of what they did. But that's the Black Robe Regiment. That's the preachers who led everything. They were the generals. They were the political leaders. You saw they signed the Declaration. I mean, they were into everything, and that's blessed us.
And let me tell you something. David is an evangelical, and David is, we're standing locked arms. And
lifetime friendship in 8 months.
And I don't know if he is here yet. Is Ryan Dobson here yet? Not yet. Dr. Dobson, Focus on the Family, he called this week, and Dr. Dobson, 2 years ago, kind of took one of my books apart because of my faith. And 2 days ago, Dr. Dobson called and said, we've been talking about what you're doing on the air and what you're standing for, and while we can't agree with faith and you don't agree with my view, etc., we want to stand together. He said, I'm sending my son to your American revival. He said he's got a whole bunch of things he's doing, but he wants to stop by and watch a little bit of it. I'm telling you, and David will verify, people are coming together.
Yeah.
And we must do everything we can to be welcome. And to put our differences aside for the big things. Stu and Pat are out in the back, and you guys are taking questions for all of the guests, right?
We are, and you can email your questions to us at revival@glennbeck.com. We already have some really important questions, Glenn. This one from Michael, who asks, what is that logo on your shirt? In other words, I think he's asking, who are you wearing today? Who is your designer?
This is George Washington. It's very nice. It comes in large colors. Tell me David's walking away like, dear God Almighty. Who are you wearing today, David? David, you can explain this.
This is actually what George Washington gave. This is the badge of merit. There are 3 of them known to still exist today. Washington just...
Hold on. Somebody call HR. He's touching me.
I'll do it again, too.
All right.
Washington was different from so many others in that he didn't want the generals to get recognition. He wanted the common people who did remarkable things to get recognition. And he would look out among the troops and he saw things that were courage. And by the way, if you read his diaries from Valley Forge, it'll make you cry to see what he saw among his troops. As he saw that, he wanted to honor those guys because nobody got honored in that era by the British troops. If you're a commoner, you're a peon. You're down low. Washington wanted to exalt the common man and exalt particularly virtues of honor and courage and faith and integrity. And when he saw it, the commander-in-chief gave you that badge right there. It was on a little bracelet that you got to wear on your arm. There's 3 of them still known to exist today. Now, they've taken that and turned it into the Purple Heart because it was a Purple Heart. Now it means you've been wounded in battle. But Washington's original badge of merit was a Purple Heart to honor and recognize great traits that he saw among common, average, ordinary soldiers.
And without giving you any information, because I am not going to put people through what he's gone through and what I have to go through every single day just for standing up, would you believe? But I tell you, we are assembling people on 828 in Washington, D.C. that have earned this, that have truly earned this. And we are bringing this back for the common people.
That's right.
On 828, 3 people are going to receive it. 3 people are going to receive it. And I also will tell you that David knows, and I know, we've been working on something. At the end of 828, it will take your breath away. We were backstage talking about it, and the 3 of us, David's wife and I, we were all talking, and I said, this is what's going to happen at the very end. And we've talked about it a million times, and I said, this is exactly how it's going to come. And David, all 3 of us said, oh my gosh, I have goosebumps. The hair is standing on end. It is going to be a historic moment. Please tell your friends, and don't miss 828. If you can make it, please. If you know somebody lives out in the East and they can come, please come. It is not a tea party. It is life-changing what is happening on 828.
All right, Glenn, another question for you. This comes from Kirsten, and it relates to the last one here. A lot of people are moving against 828 by saying you are dishonoring the Purple Heart. Where do you see the place of the Purple Heart going forward?
Where the Purple Heart already is. I mean, I'm saying that we need to honor merit inside, not just for the troops. We know, if you look at all of the things that are happening, if you look at the things that we trust and the things that we hold up in high esteem now, the troops are number one. In fact, they're the only thing that we look at now and say that those are honorable people.
That's right.
You're going to meet. I'm going to showcase some people. Marcus Luttrell will be there, and I'm going to showcase some other people. I met a guy this week. We had him on the radio. His hands were blown off. His hands had been blown off. This guy, he still wants to serve. They're remarkable, remarkable people. Well, we can't only have the people in our military being the only honorable, remarkable people. You need to do that. I need to do that. We all need to do that. And all I'm saying with this is, for all the rest of us, you know what? Are you willing to lose your hands for this? Are you willing to lose your house for it? Are you willing to lose sleep? Are you willing to have people just bash you in the head over and over and over again? You know, it is an insult to say that at this point in our history that we can compare ourselves to those who stood with Martin Luther King. We haven't had a dog sicked on us. We haven't had fire hoses opened on us. We haven't had a baton to the head yet. We may. But if that happens, the only way we will stand is if we understand honor and merit. Okay.
Glenn, we're getting a lot of emails pouring in after that last statement from addresses that end at msnbc.com saying that if you need any help with that baton to the head, they will be there for you.
Yeah. But if MSNBC says something, I mean, it's like the tree in the woods. I mean, did they really say it?
All right. Our final important question from Lazai, I think it is. Is it true, Glenn, that donuts are the answer to all of life's problems?
Yes. David, could you, one more question for you from me. Tell me if out of all of the books that you have read, all of the books that you have seen, everything that could possibly, if you only had one, out of anything that you could possibly think of, besides the Overton window, and by the way, 5,000-year leap, real George Washington, the real Thomas Jefferson, real Ben Franklin are available in the lobby, and all of the proceeds, everything after expenses for the booksellers, they are going to the 828 Project. So if you need those books, they're available there. What is the one book, if you said you have to understand this, in regards to faith and our country?
The one book I would choose is a book from 1864. It's not been reprinted recently. It is on Google Books, but it's out there for everybody to read. It's called The Chaplains and Clergy of the American Revolution. You read that, you understand faith, you understand honor, virtue, you understand the price they paid, you understand how widespread faith was, you understand how faith interacted with the founders and the pastors, and you understand how the country came to be. That's probably the single book I would choose as Pastors and Clergy of the American Revolution.
Okay, one more thing. David is going to join me, not on 8/28, but we haven't announced this yet, on 8/27. On 8/27, he is going to be doing something that has not been done in 200 and I don't know how many years, with these very sermons, and it is something that you will please look for the announcement of. I'm sorry, but MSNBC, Keith Olbermann really is, and this makes me so happy, he really is a member of Insider Extreme. Bash me all you want, but they have to pay me $9.95 a month to do it. Uh-oh. But look for that announcement because it's going to be amazing.
Mm-hmm. All right, and if you have any other questions for Glenn, you can do it right from your seats. Email revival@glennbeck.com. Include your name and section so we know where you're coming from. Or if you're on Insider Extreme watching now and you want to tell us that you're there, that would be great, too.
The only other thing we need is your Social Security number.
Right, well.
That's all.
Proof of residency.
We may be changing your long-distance carrier without your notification, but we've got a really good rate of $18.95 a month.
So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in about 15 minutes. Stretch your legs, and we'll be back with more of the American Revival.
See you in a while.
Hi, Scott Baker with you backstage here at the American Revival in Salt Lake City. And I think for Insider Extreme members, I think the last time that you may have seen me was at the Nokia Theater in Times Square when we did the event with Glenn, and a lot of you had some great questions that we were able to press Glenn with that night. Since then, I've actually joined Glenn at Mercury Radio full-time. Some incredible lapse of judgment on their part. And I've been tasked today to kind of work backstage. There's going to be traffic, people coming through, and so it might be a little crazy. In fact, wait, in 5 seconds you'll see Judge Napolitano walk behind me. There you go, right there. That happened. In fact, if you weren't an Insider Extreme member, you wouldn't know. But later, when Judge Napolitano speaks, then we'll get to talk to him afterwards. In fact, David Barton will be coming down and joining us here for just a couple of minutes. And this was kind of an opportunity to kind of talk directly to you guys because, you know, in the hall, and I tell you, I walked around, I talked to people, I saw the people coming in, and we knew the spirit of this place. But I knew that I couldn't even tell, you know, in thinking about the Insider Extreme members watching, what to expect today. And I will tell you that as we're even watching the traffic of the numbers of you watching right now, it's blown away even our expectations. Don't you people have anything better to do on a Saturday than to say, oh, let's concentrate on America's founding principles. Let's think about the things that matter. Aren't there chores to be done? Gardening, games to get to? No, apparently not. I will tell you this as I see David Barton walking over here, that I was not exactly tasked to come and do this here backstage. Having just joined Mercury full-time, I informed them that I was coming here anyway because I felt like I needed to know more. And boy, have I already learned a lot. So let's bring on David Barton. Just come on in. I'll let you take the spot here to my right. We saw Judge Napolitano walk by, but wow, I'm still reeling a little bit from everything that we learned. But this is the third American Revival that you've been a part of. Right. I've got about 18 questions, and we have about 4 minutes with you. So I'll ask you to give 4-second answers.
All right, 4 seconds.
How a lot of this, I'm gauging, you get a lot of feedback. Mm-hmm. So from the original ones, from Orlando to Phoenix to here today, what are you hearing from people as the year has gone on, as we've been able to put these ideas out there? Are people starting to get it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely starting to get it. People that are just common, average, good-hearted citizens absolutely get it. Never heard this stuff. This is cool. Of course, the nuts that run so much of the media and the left, it drives them crazy. The more good people get equipped, the more they hate it. So you get a dual reaction. The reaction from the elite to this kind of stuff is this is a terrible rally. And the reaction of the people who are here is, man, we're equipped, we're empowered, we feel like we can go kick tail somewhere.
Right. I'm scared, by the way, because I've heard, because I'm new on the Mercury staff, and I've heard Glenn on TV and interviewing people, and he always says, who's your favorite founder, right? And my problem is that every time I hear you talk, I get a different one.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Exactly.
Is that okay?
Man, don't ask me for my favorite founder because I'll rattle off 15 or 20 of them.
So if Glenn asked you, you'd be like, I can't pick one.
It could be Benjamin Rush, it could be John Jay, of course, it could be John Quinn, and I go through a bunch of them. There's just so many cool guys back there.
You know, it was a really stirring reminder, even having heard it before and heard you speak before. You know, one of the questions that popped up in my mind as I was listening today. You know, I know a couple of very patriotic conservative atheists. What's the role for the person who's not of faith and how they view America's founding on faith?
You know what? One of the things that has always stood out is America's faith is different from that of Europe. Founders made a big distinction. Don't call American Christianity European Christianity. They killed people over there. We don't do it here. It is because of the blessings of faith that we have the civil government that we have. And so under that same umbrella, even though the founders were Christians, they invited Jews in, they invited all of the religions in. And it's the same thing with even atheism. As long as it's not trying to blow up the ship that provided all the freedom, as long as it recognizes and says, okay, I don't personally believe in that, but I do recognize that's a ship that's carrying me, that's fine. And that's the way Roger Williams talked about it when he founded Rhode Island, is you may not agree with me, but don't try to blow up the ship that brought it here. And so the faith that has made us who we are as a people, man, if you don't agree with that, that's fine, but just don't try to blow it up. Don't try to destroy what made us who we are.
Let me ask you one question, because I've watched and been a part of the conservative movement for 20, 25 years, and I've seen various sort of phases that we've gone through, from the moral majority, the Christian coalition, to disenfranchisement with some of those ideas, to sort of re-engagement. And then I know even this year there's been a lot of discussion, a book that's been out there saying that maybe people of faith need to step back from politics a little bit to kind of take a posture of what's been called sort of faithful presence. Your view on how to balance a faith that informs politics but isn't diminished by politics
I would
in the
answer
public
that
square.
with one of my favorite founding fathers. They go to Benjamin Rush, and Benjamin Rush talked about that there as one of the top three. When he set up the plan for what we should do in schools in America, he said schools should do three things in them. He said, number one, they should teach students God, a love for God, and responsibility to God. You're accountable to Him. Number two, you should teach students to love and serve their country. And number three, to love and serve their family. Now, today we would have said God, family, country. He said God, and you go, wait a minute, time out, why? And he said, if you ever lose control of your government, it'll become the great enemy of the family. And so their perspective was, if you don't stay involved to keep government friendly to these areas, then you're going to pay the price for it. And I cannot tell you, I have a collection in the last 2 months of people of faith who have been arrested simply for sharing their faith in public. Now, that's a stupid thing to say, let's not get involved. Let's let these guys be hostile to us. Only when faith is present do you really have the tolerance that we need, and that's what we got to have. We got to have people involved. Otherwise, we will be arrested for sharing the very things we talk about.
David, thanks. And I know, and I guess you back up with later in the afternoon. Everybody up there. All right, looking forward to it.
Thanks, bro.
Indeed.
See you, man.
Fantastic. And we're gonna, we'll do the same thing with David Buckner and with Judge Napolitano, and I'll try to go and I know they're going to ask questions from the floor, as Stu and Pat are going to do that. So, but we may even be able to slip in a couple. So if you want to email, I think it was revival at glenbeck.com. And if you want to slip in some questions that you think maybe I can get to Buckner or to Napolitano, I'll try to go and I'll sneak a look at Pat Gray's iPad and see if I can pull the questions off of there. This is a remarkable event, and you are remarkable for supporting it. And I want you to know that your investment in Insider Extreme, I hope you've already feel like it's been paying off. I've talked to people who watched some of the Beck University broadcasts already and said, wow, was this worth it? I wish everybody could see it. And as you know, just for the small investment you've made, it's allowed us to support the kind of thing that we're doing, that we're going to do even more of. And even the little glimpses that I've had as I've come on board to help kind of build out some of these things and help Glenn get the message out. You're very much a part of it, and we want to say thank you for that. So now listen, we got coming up here, because we're going to have to take a quick break on the stream, just because it's kind of like a race car pulling in for the pit stop. You kind of got to take the tires off and pump it up. So we'll power down here in a second and get the thing cranked back up. So don't go away. I know a ton of you are watching, and we're really grateful for that. But one of the things that I think is going to be most exciting about what's coming up is, even as Glenn's out there every day sounding alarm bells about things that are wrong, about things that are potential crises, the things that could do us in. You know that it's not just faith, it's hope. We have to kind of provide that positive spark, that positive message that says, here's where we're going. And that's going to be this next integral part. I appreciate you being here. Scott Baker with you. I'll be back at the other side of David Buckner. We'll see you in the lunchtime hour. In the meantime, enjoy the American Revival from Salt Lake City.
You want, send it to revival@glenbeck.com throughout the day. We have some questions kind of filtered in throughout, and then there'll be a longer Q&A section later in the day where we get to a lot of stuff. So anything you can think of as you're going through the day, please send it there to revival@glenbeck.com.
We're going to have a whole section, in fact, where Stu and I will ask your questions of all the speakers here today, which include, of course, but are not limited to, David Buckner is here, David Barton, Judge Andrew Napolitano, and, of course, Glenn Beck.
They seem pretty split on Glenn, too. Kind of 50-50 on him.
Yeah, a little iffy.
Also, a couple of other interesting things going on today. LDStravel.com is giving away to you guys here today a trip to Israel for 8 days. Yeah, very cool. So you got to be 21 years or older to enter. But just write this down or keep it in your memory banks. I see you filming me. I see you. Don't try to hide your camera. Any unauthorized reproduction or retransmission of this broadcast is just ask the NBA. They'll let you know. So here's the number to text. It is 801-411. You're going to text the name Beck, B-E-C-K, to 801-411. You could do it throughout the day. We'll remind you incessantly about it so you know what it is in case you don't have it now. It's text the word Beck to 801-411 to win a trip to Israel. Very cool package.
The other thing is that our friends from the National Center for Constitutional Studies are here. And yes, they deserve it.
Woo, Constitution! Woo!
These guys have been fighting for a really long time to keep the Constitution alive, and they do a great job of it. And they're selling some books in their booth, and I believe that's on, last I heard, it was at Concourse X. And all proceeds from the sales of that booth today, from all of their books, will go to the Special Operations Warriors Fund. So...
And the 828 event, so it's going to be great.
Yeah, and 828.
And they, you probably know a lot of their books, such as the 5,000-Year Leap. Anyone heard of that?
The real George Washington, the real Thomas Jefferson, the real Ben Franklin, the real McCoy, the real thing. I think they have a book on Coke.
The
anyway.
Other White Meat, I believe, is one of their books.
Yes. Are we done yet?
I know, this is endless, isn't it?
I mean,
828, by the way, you guys know about that. Anyone going to 828 in Washington? Wow. That is very impressive. As you know, you can go to glenbeck.com/828 and find out all the details about it, as well as they're doing great auction items and donations. Certainly would appreciate anything you can do for that. And that is, as well benefits the Special Ops Warriors Foundation, which is a fantastic cause. So thank you guys so much for coming out. The American Revival begins in just moments.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Sit. We have a long day. Thank you so much for coming. God bless you. God bless you. God bless you. God bless you. I tell you, when we first started this, it was about, 6 months ago. And I had been holding on by a thread. Because we have gigantic problems that we have not seen before as a collective. We've faced each of these battles one by one, but as a collective, never anything like this. And I have to tell you, the more research I do, the more I learn about the people that we have currently serving supposedly in the name of our republic and our Constitution, the more frightened I become, the more I look at it and say, my gosh, the armada that they have amassed and put up against the American people is staggering. 6 months ago, I was holding on by a thread, but let me tell you, as I was standing backstage and I was watching that video on Faith, let me tell you something right now. Prepare to witness miracles in your lifetime. God is not having us hang by a thread. He has put a rope down for us to hang on to. I promise you, in the next 6 months, you will see things, good and bad, that you did not see coming. I promise you that the Lord is going to reveal himself, and America is going to begin to come together again. United we stand, divided we fall. One thing I need you to get out of this today is we can disagree. That doesn't mean that we have to be disagreeable. We don't hate anyone. I don't mean to lecture you because I'm tired of people lecturing us on how much we hate. We don't. We just love America. We come together and we unite on big principles. That doesn't mean that we don't state our position clearly and we don't stand fast. You do not compromise on principles. That is the thing that they don't seem to understand. But if we stand fast, if we hold on to the only thing, truly, the only rock that we can, God, if we hold on, if we build everything on that rock, we will not only survive, we will thrive, and America will lead the way out of darkness yet again. So, we have an amazing day. There are things that are going to happen today that haven't happened before on this event. I'm sorry, but I can't see you with my glasses, and then I really can't see you with the glare off my glasses. We have...
Hello?
Hello. Hi. Again, we greet you from within the shadow of the everlasting hills. May peace be with you this day and always. Sorry for the late start. We're waiting for a few extra stragglers. Fortunately, you guys care about America. You're here on time. You're ready to go. When the stragglers come in and sit down next to you, you might want to say, excuse me, why don't you care about America? Why do you hate America? Why?
Yeah, you'll notice at the bottom here, this front section, or the back section there on the first few seats, we marked that off for the communists.
Look at that.
And we got
Whole row.
No one.
2 sections, all commies.
By the way, I'm Stu. This is Pat Gray.
Hi.
Thank you all so much for coming out. It's going to be a great day. And there's quite a bit to cover, as you will find out during the day, including we have not only you guys here watching, but also we should say hello to the Insider Extreme members who are at home right now.
Hi.
Please give them a warm welcome. They love you here. They love you.
People are actually viewing this on the World Wide Web, which, of course, was invented by Al Gore.
He tried to come, but I guess there was a problem with his convoy. Do you have any information on that?
His SUVs got stuck in traffic. But yes, I did invent the internet about the same time Love Story was written about Tipper and me. But we also have some very special dignitaries here among us, and we would like to welcome Senator Orrin Hatch today. Also, Congressman Jason Chaffetz is here.
I think everyone thinks they know where he's sitting, but no one actually does.
A little iffy on Congressman Chaffetz, are we? Still trying to make up our minds. It's only been a year and a half. We'll see how he does. I don't know. I'm not sure. We also want to welcome First Lady Annette Herbert to the arena today. Thanks for coming.
So you don't come to a Glenn Beck program show without homework. It's not like you just sit here and enjoy yourself. There's work for you to do. And you'll notice, a lot of people actually like that. It's surprising. One of the things we'll be doing throughout the day is having your questions answered by the speakers. And there's an easy way to do that. While you're right at your seats, just email it to revival@glennbeck.com. Any question?
Faith is different than hope. It's a knowing, a believing in something when circumstances around you would indicate otherwise. There is no country on earth more familiar with the concept of faith than America. Faith is the very cornerstone of the foundation on which our country was built. You might even say it's in our DNA. Every chapter of our great history begins with a spectacular act of faith. Let me take you back to September 1620, the beginning. 102 passengers crammed aboard the Mayflower. It was a creaky old vessel, certainly not a passenger ship by any stretch of the imagination. It had been a wine hauler. Pilgrims, young, old, filled every nook and cranny. Friends, family on shore begged them to reconsider. They warned of the perils that awaited them if they were lucky enough to survive the trip across the unknown sea. The Pilgrims stood firm on their faith that no matter what the challenges might be that lay ahead, freedom was waiting on the other shore. On to 1775, and what had to be the greatest mismatch since David picked up his slingshot and squared off against Goliath. What in the world would possibly motivate an upstart group of British colonies without a real army to seek their freedom by declaring war on the greatest military power in the world? Where there seemingly was no hope, there was faith. Faith that the cause of America was righteous. The same feeling of knowing that inspired young David. Just about a century later, American families were packing up everything they owned and headed out to a new frontier, the Wild West, in pursuit of happiness. They didn't know what they were going to find when they got there or what they would encounter along the way. They weren't even 100% sure that they would make it there alive, but they knew they had to try. They had the pioneering spirit, which is just another way of saying that they had faith in their own ability to create a better life. In 1879, after hundreds and hundreds of failures, the faith and perseverance of one Thomas Edison gave us the electric light bulb. But he never stopped believing in the idea or his ability to get it right. Same force at play late 1903 in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, where a young man, ignoring warnings of dire consequence, strapped himself on board a contraption that would become the world's first powered airplane. When no one else believed, Orville and Wilbur Wright knew man could fly. A few years later, faith in American innovation led builders to reach towards the heavens with Manhattan's Chrysler Building and Empire State Building, with every steel girder and concrete block of the iconic skyscrapers defying the legion of doubters who said it just couldn't be done. In the 1960s, a young minister had the faith to dream of a better day, of freedom, equality, a realization that all men are created equal. Martin Luther King's giant-like faith gave him assurance that all the pain and his ultimate sacrifice would lead to an outcome men before him could only dream about. 2 decades later, Americans once again exercised faith and put that faith in the most unlikely of politicians, an actor who made up for a lack of experience with a passion for America and a faith that she could return to her previous greatness. And in 2001, our faith greatly challenged, our security shattered, a country united in the faith that we would overcome, that God was still watching over, that no country, no terrorist would ever destroy our American way of life. Faith. From the very beginning of this great country, faith. Faith in God. Faith in an ideal. Faith in our own abilities. It has driven us to become the greatest people the world has ever known. But we are, right now, as a country, facing one of the greatest challenges in our existence. We face an uncertain future. New, imposing enemies, new frontiers that need to be won and conquered, a need for innovation to save our economy. We face a battle for the Republic, a battle for America's survival. Does the faith that burned in the hearts of our forefathers and mothers exist in us today? Do we still have what it takes to meet our challenges head on, knowing that our cause is righteous and just? Can we still reach for answers not readily apparent, solutions not yet revealed? Do we, you and me, still have faith?
Hello, Utah! Hello.